This is the image nobody thought we'd ever see. For 10 years, Donald Trump seemed untouchable. Impeachments came and went without leaving a mark. Indictments seemed only to boost his popularity. Civil judgments were delayed, appealed, or bonded away, as if the rules that applied to everyone else simply didn't touch him. He operated in a reality where consequences were someone else's problem. But this morning, Saturday, January 24th, 2026, that reality shattered. The Teflon finally melted. Breaking news out of New York City has thrown the presidency into unprecedented chaos. A New York State Supreme Court justice has just issued an order for the immediate execution of judgment against the Trump Organization. This isn't a threat, this isn't a warning, this is a full-on seizure order. Right now, the New York City Sheriff's Office, the agency responsible for enforcing civil judgments, is preparing to serve foreclosure notices on some of the most iconic properties Trump owns. We're talking about 40 Wall Street. We're talking about the commercial floors of Trump Tower. We're even talking about the private jet. Why now? Why while he's still in the Oval Office? The answer lies in a chain reaction triggered by the global financial shock we discussed yesterday, the Japan bond crash. This event claimed its first major victim, the bonding agency securing Trump's massive civil fraud appeal. The liquidity crisis in Tokyo triggered a margin call in New York. The insurer pulled the bond. Trump, strapped for cash from ongoing legal battles, and his campaign, couldn't replace it within the 24-hour emergency window set by the court. The stay protecting his assets was lifted. His shield was down. For the first time in American history, a sitting president is facing active liquidation of his private business empire by a state government. The Secret Service is now in a standoff with local law enforcement over access to these buildings. The White House counsel is screaming for intervention from the Supreme Court, and the president himself is reportedly furious, threatening to federalize the National Guard to defend his property. We are witnessing a collision of capitalism, constitutional law, and a financial crash all happening at once. In this report, we'll break down exactly how this catastrophe unfolded. We'll analyze which assets are on the chopping block, why the Japan shock made this unavoidable, and whether New York State can legally evict a sitting president from his own tower. Buckle up, history is being written in real time. To understand why the sheriff is moving today, we must first examine the financial plumbing that collapsed overnight. Recall the $464 million civil fraud judgment from 2024, brought by Letitia James. Trump appealed. To delay asset seizure during the appeal, he had to post a bond. A less than reliable company guaranteed it. For 2 years, the bond held like a dam, holding back floodwaters. But yesterday, the global financial system quaked. The Japanese bond market crashed. The yen carry trade unwound, and trillions of dollars evaporated from the global banking system in hours. According to leaked reports, the reinsurance consortium backing Trump's appeal bond was heavily exposed to Japanese commercial debt. When Tokyo collapsed, the consortium's balance sheet imploded late Friday night. Regulators, or the company's risk committee, forced a de-risking event. They withdrew the bond. Normally, defendants get 30 days to find a replacement bond. But this is New York. This is Letitia James. And this is a judge who has lost patience. The court ruled that given the precarious liquidity of the defendant and global financial instability, no grace period would be granted. The reasoning was harsh but simple. If the president truly had billions, he could write a check. If he couldn't, the assets had to be secured before they lost value in the crashing market. At 9 a.m., the order was signed. Immediate seizure. The President of the United States effectively got a margin call on his life's work, and he couldn't meet it. Letitia James isn't after golf courses. They're slow, messy, and difficult to liquidate. She's after cash flow and trophy assets. First target, 40 Wall Street, the crown jewel of Trump's portfolio. It's a massive skyscraper in the financial district. But Trump doesn't own the land. He owns the ground lease. Ground leases are complicated. Defaulting can void or sell the lease. Taking 40 Wall Street strikes at Trump's identity as a New York mogul. It is valuable, liquid, and symbolic. Second target, Trump Tower, commercial and retail spaces, the bottom floors, the office spaces, the Gucci store. A court-appointed receiver could take over management, redirecting rents from tenants straight to the state. Trump might still own it on paper, but control and cash flow would be gone. he would become a tenant in his own building. The third target is the Seven Springs estate in Westchester, central to the fraud case. It isn't his personal home. It's an investment property with inflated valuations. Seizing it is clean, straightforward, and legally airtight. Fourth on the list, the bank accounts. This is where the threat hits immediately. The sheriff can issue levies to every major bank in New York, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Citibank, freezing any account tied to the Trump organization and diverting the funds to pay the judgment. Payrolls could bounce. Hotel staff, doormen, executives, everyone could go unpaid. Within 24 hours, a company can be effectively paralyzed. This is where a financial crisis collides with a constitutional one. Trump Tower isn't just office space. It's the president's private residence, a fortress under Secret Service control. Elevators, airspace, perimeter, everything is under federal protection. The sheriff is a law enforcement officer with a court order commanding entry. So, what happens when he reaches the revolving doors on Fifth Avenue? The scenario is tense. The sheriff approaches. A Secret Service agent steps forward. "Sir, you cannot enter. This is a secure zone protecting the National Command Authority." The sheriff responds, "I have a warrant to seize this property." The agent insists federal law supersedes state law. Access is denied. Guns are present, egos are massive, and the standoff is imminent. The Attorney General anticipated this, which is why the focus is on commercial entities first. They don't need to go after the Penthouse to seize the LLC's bank accounts. But the optics are brutal. Imagine news footage of New York State officials pasting seize stickers on the windows of Gucci in the lobby of the president's own building. It's humiliation designed to provoke a reaction. If Trump orders the Secret Service to physically block the sheriff from executing a civil order, he risks obstruction of justice charges. Yet he will argue the state is trying to bankrupt the president to stop him from governing a coup by other means. Sources inside the White House describe the atmosphere as nuclear. Trump sees his net worth as inseparable from his identity. His buildings are like children to him. This isn't just a legal dispute, it's personal. He's reportedly on the phone with his new attorney general demanding that the DOJ intervene. He wants an emergency injunction in federal court, claiming a sitting president is immune from civil asset seizure. This is uncharted legal territory. The Supreme Court ruled in Clinton v. Jones that a president can face civil lawsuits, but eviction, asset liquidation while running the country, that's unprecedented. His argument is that financial stress distracts him from governing. If he's worried about his properties, he cannot negotiate treaties, manage crises, or oversee the economy. His wallet, he claims, is a national asset because his attention is. But the Japan crisis weakens that claim. Americans are watching their 401 keys drop, inflation rise, and the markets tremble. If the president uses his power to save his fortune while the country suffers, he loses his populist appeal forever. Normally, a billionaire facing a liquidity crunch calls a friend, a Saudi prince, or a hedge fund. "Loan me $500 million for 6 months. I'll repay it." But today is Saturday, January 24th, 2026. The global financial system is fractured. Japanese banks are pulling liquidity home. American banks are terrified of regulatory backlash. Oil and geopolitical volatility make external funding uncertain. Trump is toxic collateral. Who wants to lend $500 million to a president fighting the courts, with assets being seized and a political future in question? The risk premium is astronomical. This is why the immediate seizure order is so devastating. The judge knows Trump is illiquid. The judge knows the Japan shock has frozen credit markets. The strike comes at his moment of maximum vulnerability, a coordinated financial decapitation. In Peoria, in the heart of the MAGA base, this will look like theft. Communism. They see his buildings being stolen. Expect rallies outside Trump Tower. Expect legal defense donations to spike, though raising $464 million in small contributions is impossible. Still, it reinforces the martyrdom narrative. Independents watch too. Americans admire winners. Part of Trump's appeal has always been, "I'm rich, I cannot be bought." If he appears broke, if his buildings are seized, the aura of competence collapses. He cannot even manage his own bond. How can he manage the economy? Combine this with the wipeout poll and the Japan crash, and the image of a crumbling administration emerges. Donors from 2024 are vanishing, seeing the asset seizure as the final straw. They don't want their names tied to a sinking ship. The invisible primary for 2028 effectively starts now. Political players like Dantis and Vance are watching, thinking, he's financially ruined and politically toxic. Time to move on. So, how does this end? The battle moves to the Supreme Court. Trump's team will file an emergency stay request with Justice Sotomayor, who oversees the Second Circuit. She may deny it or escalate it to the full court. Then the Trump court, the 6-3 conservative majority, faces a monumental choice. Step in and block the state? They risk looking like partisan hacks protecting their political patron. Stand aside, and they allow the leader of their own party to be publicly humiliated and potentially bankrupted. It's the ultimate test for Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. And don't forget, they watch the polls too. Seeing the wipeout numbers, they may conclude Trump is a liability, allowing New York to move forward. We are witnessing the final act of the Trump business story. Whether he retains his buildings or not, the veil of invincibility is shattered. The billionaire is being treated like any foreclosure victim, and the damage is already done. As Sunday approaches, the feeds will be critical. Watch for the appointment of a receiver, bank levy notices, and the storm on Truth Social. But the larger story is the Japanese markets. If the financial collapse spreads, Trump's personal woes could become the least of our concerns. For one man in the White House, seeing his name being stripped from the facades of his empire, it is an apocalypse. His buildings are under siege, and this time, the walls are actually being breached. To fully grasp the legal mechanism at work, we need to understand the role of a court-appointed receiver. Under New York law, specifically CPLR, Article 52, a judge can appoint a receiver to administer the property of a judgment debtor. This isn't a mere oversight role. The receiver replaces the owner entirely. They can collect rents, manage tenants, and make executive decisions for the property. For 40 Wall Street, the tenants from law firms to businesses receive notices to pay the receiver, not Trump. The receiver controls operations, decides who cleans, who provides security, and who gets fired. Yes, even the Trump children on payroll could be dismissed. The receiver answers only to the judge. It's a state-sanctioned hostile takeover. The Trump organization essentially becomes a zombie entity, existing solely to satisfy Letitia James's judgment. Because the LLC structure and corporate veil were pierced in the fraud trial, this takeover is legally enforceable. The Trump brand transforms into a tenant of New York State, while real estate loans complicate matters further. Almost every commercial loan has clauses bad boy guarantees, default on judgments that can trigger acceleration. If lenders declare default, they demand full repayment immediately. Trump cannot meet these calls. Banks will foreclose on top of the state's seizure, consuming any remaining equity. The asset gets stripped, the judgment paid, and in a Japan crisis environment, banks will not be lenient. They will accelerate loans to protect themselves. One domino falls, and the entire tower could collapse. The cascading effect is brutal. Personal distraction, constitutional conflict, and economic paralysis converge. The president spends 18 hours a day on legal matters rather than generals or economic crises. The Japan crisis is eroding global stability while Trump obsesses over Letitia James. At what point does the cabinet conclude the president is compromised? Financial duress now conflicts directly with the duties of the office. The 25th Amendment becomes a possibility. It sounds extreme, but if Trump tries to use the military to seize the New York Supreme Court or nationalize banks to protect his accounts, the cabinet is legally and morally obliged to respond. This is exactly the type of conflict the founders feared. It's why blind trusts exist to prevent personal assets from interfering with governance. Trump rejected them. Now the bill comes due. Consider the magnitude of what's at stake. If the receiver sells 40 Wall Street next week, the value is nowhere near what it was in 2023. Optimistically, it might have been $200, $300 million. But by 2026, the New York commercial real estate market is already weakened by remote work trends, and interest rates have spiked due to the Japan crisis. This is a forced sale, a fire sale. Institutional investors, private equity firms like Blackstone, and even foreign sovereign wealth funds will swoop in, offering pennies on the dollar. The lease alone might go for $50 million. Trump loses the building, the sale barely covers the judgment, and he remains in debt. This is the cruelty of forced liquidation. Billions can evaporate into mere millions or nothing at all once liquidity discounts are applied. And the implications extend far beyond Trump personally. Global leaders, including Putin and Xi Jinping, are observing this closely. A local judge seizing the emperor's palace? In authoritarian cultures, such a scenario is unimaginable. They see weakness, chaos, and instability. They perceive a US leader who cannot even secure his own assets. For strategic calculations, this is alarming. Greenland negotiations, corporate partnerships, defense commitments, everything is filtered through the lens of American instability. CEOs and investors watching the Japan crash and Trump's legal meltdown may hesitate to commit billions. If the president is consumed by repossession notices and court battles, policy freezes, decisions stall. A personal crisis morphs into a national one, paralyzing governance. Now let's focus on the Trump Tower penthouse, the symbol of his image and personal identity. The gold doors, the Louis XIV furniture, the lavish interiors, this is his sanctuary, his fortress. Even if the sheriff doesn't enter today, the legal threat looms. Every night, he sleeps with the knowledge that the state might claim his penthouse. For a man whose self-image is rooted in winning and ownership, the psychological pressure is immense. Being a squatter in his own mind, forced to fear losing the spaces that define him, is worse than any jail sentence. This explains the rage, the panic, the obsessive focus on defending these assets. He is fighting for identity, for legacy, for the symbols of success that have built his public persona. The consequences ripple through the American psyche as well. This isn't mere celebrity gossip. It's a stress test of the republic. Can the law touch the highest office? Can the system endure backlash from citizens, supporters, and political factions if it does? Can the economy weather the crossfire? We are in uncharted waters. Historical maps and political playbooks are useless. The sheriff is at the door, the bond market is burning, and the president is cornered. History shows that cornered leaders are unpredictable, dangerous, impulsive, and desperate. The next move won't be a tweet. Expect an executive order, a confrontation, or a resignation. The stakes couldn't be higher. Understanding the role of the court-appointed receiver is critical. In New York, under CPLR Article 52, a judge can appoint a receiver to take full control of a judgment debtor's property. This is not symbolic oversight. It's operational control. The receiver collects rents, manages employees, and executes decisions previously reserved for the owner. For example, in 40 Wall Street, tenants from law firms to commercial businesses receive instructions to pay the receiver instead of Trump. Operational authority is transferred. Decisions about staffing, security, cleaning, and management fall under the receiver's control. Even members of the Trump family on payroll could be dismissed. The receiver reports only to the judge, creating a hostile takeover sanctioned by the state. The Trump Organization, under a court-appointed receiver, essentially becomes a zombie entity, existing solely to satisfy Letitia James's judgment. The corporate veil has been pierced in the fraud trial, making this takeover legally enforceable. The Trump brand becomes a tenant of the state of New York, stripped of control but still nominally owned. On top of that, almost every building has loans attached, hundreds of millions owed to lenders like Axos Bank and others. Many commercial loans include clauses for defaults triggered by judgments or asset seizures. Even if Trump is current on monthly payments, the act of seizure itself can trigger default. Lenders can demand full repayment immediately, $100 million, $200 million, however much is owed. Trump cannot meet these calls. Banks will foreclose on top of the state's claim, seizing the equity and accelerating loans to protect themselves. It becomes a feeding frenzy. The state wants the equity, the bank wants the principal, and the assets are torn apart. The cascading effects are immediate and severe. One domino falls, and the entire financial structure is at risk. Trump, distracted by legal battles, spends more time on lawyers than on generals. The Japan crisis is shaking the global economy, yet the president is consumed by personal litigation. At some point, the cabinet may determine he is compromised, unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office because personal financial survival conflicts with national obligations. This is exactly why the founders instituted mechanisms like the emoluments clause and blind trusts, to prevent conflicts of interest from threatening the functioning of the presidency. Trump ignored these safeguards, and now the consequences are unavoidable. The forced sale of 40 Wall Street is another brutal reality. In 2023, it might have been worth $200, $300 million. In 2026, with interest rates spiking and a weaker commercial market, it could sell for pennies on the dollar. Vultures like Blackstone, private equity, or foreign sovereign wealth funds will swoop in, and the receiver may be forced to accept offers far below value, perhaps $50 million. Trump loses the building, does not cover the judgment, and remains in debt. Billions can evaporate to millions, or even zero, under forced liquidation conditions. On the world stage, this sends a signal. Putin, Xi, and other leaders see a president unable to secure his own empire, projecting weakness, instability, and chaos. In authoritarian cultures, this perception emboldens rivals. Greenland negotiations, strategic partnerships, corporate investment, they all become uncertain. If the president is preoccupied with personal repossessions, policy freezes. National priorities stall. Trump Tower's penthouse, his sanctuary, remains under threat. The gold doors, the opulent furnishings, the entire space symbolizes his identity and authority. Even without physical entry by the sheriff, the looming legal risk creates immense psychological pressure. For a man whose self-worth is tied to winning and ownership, the idea of potentially losing control of his own space is worse than imprisonment. It explains the panic, the fury, and the obsessive legal focus. He is not just defending property, he is defending identity, legacy, and power. In sum, this is more than a personal or financial crisis. It is a test of the American system. Can the law reach the highest office? Can the republic survive the backlash? Can the economy endure the fallout? The sheriff is at the door, the bond market is burning, and the president is cornered. History reminds us that cornered leaders act unpredictably. The next moves could be executive orders, confrontations, or even resignation. The stakes are historic, unprecedented, and irreversible. This weekend, history books are being written. The collapse of the Teflon presidency is underway, and the walls of Trump's empire are finally being breached.